In our last episode, we explored what ADHD care is and how to get yourself to do it. But what if you tried that and it didn't help? That's what we're diving into in this week's episode. You'll walk away with greater insight and a new way of thinking about this challenge and a way to address it. Be sure to listen. Welcome to the Self Loved ADHD Woman's Way podcast. I'm your host, Jen Barnes. If you're an ADHD woman entrepreneur, ADHD adjacent, or ADHD-ish, you've come to the right place. We'll dive deep into the unique challenges you face, from the inner turmoil to the outer obstacles. We'll blend neuroscience, IFS, and somatic healing, and explore practical strategies to help you navigate the world of entrepreneurship with ADHD with greater ease and effectiveness. I'm glad you're here. Hey, it's Jen. I'm so glad you're here. Today, we're going to talk about something that I've been working through lately that usually is not something I struggle with, but that I hear is so hard for most women with ADHD. And if you want to consider this maybe almost a part two for our last episode, in our last episode, we talked about the decision, like using the decisional balance to get clear on underlying things that are keeping you from doing your ADHD care. And we also talked a lot about different pieces of ADHD care and how they're helpful, things like getting in regular movement, eating nutrient-dense foods, protein at every meal, mindfulness meditation, things like that, right? Getting plenty of sleep. And sometimes those things can be really hard for ADHDers, just even with how our brains are wired. But a lot of times we have other things going on inside of us that are also making it challenging. So last episode, we talked about getting clear on the secondary gains of staying the same, which it seems like there wouldn't be gains of staying the same. Like when you're struggling with your ADHD and you're noticing the distraction makes things take longer and then you have less free time and that's miserable. And that's just one example. Or you're spiraling more because of rejection sensitive dysphoria. Whatever it is, it seems like the pain of those things would be motivating enough to get ourselves to do the ADHD care. And a lot of times, sometimes it can be for some people, but for a lot of people, it just isn't. And whether that's because their ADHD is more severe or some of the things we're going to talk about today, it's an important conversation to have. So, if you haven't already, make sure you also listen to last week's episode because that touches on a different piece than what we're going to talk about today. That touches on getting clear on, like, okay, why is this pain not enough for me? Why is this discomfort not enough? And it's usually because there's a benefit to you doing exactly what you're doing. Even though it sucks, it doesn't suck as bad as parts of you think it will if you did the changes that you know would help you, right? So, all right. So I go way more into that in our last episode, but that just to kind of catch you up in case you didn't catch that one. And I want to acknowledge as we get started into this episode how hard it can be with ADHD for our brains to do stuff, especially things that are not interesting. When our brains, because of our difficulty accessing sufficient dopamine for motivation and other executive function like focusing and things like that, a lot of times it can be hard to get ourselves to do things. And so that is part of how our brains are, unless we're interested in it. Because when we're interested, we get dopamine out of the task itself. So then it's a task that becomes easier to do because it's helping us do it. Like the task is already helping us do the task kind of thing. So a lot of times the problem is getting ourselves to do the stuff that we don't want to do. And I see this all the time with exercise. I don't want to exercise. And I'm not making fun of anyone, but like I hear that a lot, which is why I often don't even use the E word because so many people are allergic to it from the toxic fitness industry, of which I used to be a part back in the day. But I get it. I get how hard it can be. And if we want ourselves to do our ADHD care, we need to make it interesting. That's not what this video is about, but that is one piece of it that needs to be acknowledged because otherwise, you're going to struggle and fight and use the limited willpower you have to get yourself to do stuff. And it's just, you're going to run out and not be able to do everything you want to do. So I just want to acknowledge that because it's important to recognize, like, I in no way want you to feel shame when we're having this conversation that you can't do it or you've been struggling to do it. I want to change that language. You haven't done it yet, perhaps, is something you could play with because I know it's hard. And I want you to enjoy your life more than you already do. I want your life to be easier than it already is. I want you to be able to do the things you want to do with more ease than you already have. Because I know if you're listening to this, your ADHD is creating additional stress for you in some way. I know that chances are you're having trouble with distraction or maintaining your focus, directing your focus, starting tasks, completing tasks. Sometimes rejection sensitive dysphoria or spiraling in our emotions. Any of those things could be what's going on. Not to mention some of the other things like being fidgety or interacting socially differently than other people do and then getting in trouble because the way we talk is perceived as interrupting or taking like stealing under other people's thunder when really that's a lot of times how we connect, right? So if you're here, I suspect you struggle with some elements of ADHD, and I want to help you with that. The problem is, until the pain of staying the same is more than the pain of changing, you may have a hard time making the changes. And that's why I want you to do the decisional balance from last week and also make sure that you're getting clear on maybe take some time. You can even pause this podcast and write out, like, how does my ADHD impact me? Because a lot of times, if you're a late diagnosed woman, you may not even realize how much your ADHD impacts you. That was certainly my thing. I was a overfunctioner high achiever, and so I've done a lot of awesome things. It wasn't till perimenopause that I really started to realize, oh, my ADHD impacts me way more than I had ever noticed. And yes, perimenopause can exacerbate it because of the drop in estrogen, which is connected to dopamine. But at the same time, it kind of shined a big spotlight on it. So I was like, oh, yeah, okay, here's all the ways it is impacting me. Here's how my life isn't as easy as it could be if I didn't have ADHD or if my ADHD was better managed. So take some time, think about those pain points. And I want to share next, before I dive into how to help, just to give you some backstory on how we got here. So I just came back from vacation. I was on vacation for a week in Florida, which sounds lovely. I didn't really want to go to Florida, but anyway, it was a nice place. We got to see dolphins. That was awesome. But it was exhausting. I didn't have a lot of like alone time. That like the amount I usually get. I was around, there was 6 people staying in the place I was in, people I love and care about, but it was still, I'm not used to that much stimulation. And so I came home exhausted. I was completely drained. And some of it probably is I was doing a crap ton of work to prepare for vacation. So I was tired going in, but I did not feel rested afterwards. I'd also done a ton of driving as we went all over. So, and I tend to be the driver. So anyway, I was beat tired and I did not feel like doing any of my self-love things, my ADHD care this week, but I still did them. And I had an added challenge, which is something that I think a lot of people normally have in their life that I usually have eliminated because it can be so, I don't want to say daunting isn't the right word, but it has such a negative impact on me. I got hooked on Glee. I'd never seen it before while I was on spring break. My sister and my niece were watching it, and I watched episodes 2, 3, and 4 with them. And I came home. And from Sunday, the time my plane landed, maybe I ate, so it was maybe like 3:30, 4 o'clock. So I got home, started watching Glee at around 4 o'clock. And between then and Monday and Tuesday, during which I worked 9 to 9.5 hour days, I watched 11 episodes of Glee. And if you're like, whoa, Jen, that's straight obsessive. Yes, that's why I unplugged my TV a year ago. So I would not have access to things like this because I have not very good self-control when it comes to this. I want to know what happens. I want to get to the point where I have some clarity and I almost cannot stop myself. It's pretty ridiculous. So one of the things that I do is I work with the Get It Done Fairy, who at the time of the task or the thing we want to stop or start, I set the Get It Done fairy up for success. So to get myself to stop watching Glee because that interrupted my sleep, I slept like crap. And that's kind of what's making it more aware to me how important this is. And I thought I'd share my experience because I'm like, this is stuff people struggle with all the time. And I usually don't. So it's fresh in my mind. So before I go where I was going, let me just say I noticed I wasn't sleeping well. I was having crazy dreams, most of them about high school and kids I barely knew. It was very bizarre. I was waking up throughout the night. And then because I was up late watching Glee and not sleeping well, I slept in later. So my morning self love rituals were all cut short. And that was when I needed them the most because I was tired and also had some other feelings to work through. And so it just didn't go well. And after 2 days of seeing therapy clients and having a really hard time, actually, it was like 3 days because it wasn't till Wednesday evening. But Wednesday during the day, I was like, I feel like crap. I'm not as present with people. I'm like not really able to focus all that well. I'm moving really slow getting anything done. And don't get me wrong, we all have high energy days and low energy days. This was not that. This was me being completely tanked. And I was like, yeah, some of it's probably being tired from vacation, but I'm also watching 2 or 3 episodes of Glee every night, which is meaning I'm going to bed at 11:30 instead of 10 or 10:30, and then I'm waking up later, I'm not sleeping as well. This is not working for me. This is not working for me. So literally last night, Wednesday, actually Wednesday morning, I could kind of sense I wasn't doing well. So I moved the everything that I needed to watch Glee upstairs into this room so that I would have to climb upstairs and I hid it from myself. So I'd have to go through the effort of getting it out and it was going to be a huge pain. I created friction between myself and the thing I wanted to do that wasn't serving me. And then I didn't watch it. Instead, I set my book out to read. And while I cooked dinner, I put on my favorite band, well, one of my favorite bands, Cloud Cult on Spotify, and listened to them because they usually put me in a mood that's more interested in reading versus sitting and numbing out with TV. And I made sure my phone was nowhere near the couch so I couldn't just pick it up. And I sat there and read. Now, granted, I wasn't able to get my nonfiction reading in because I needed something super interesting to pull me away from the shiny sparkliness of Glee. But I was able to do it. And I want to talk a little bit about how I got there. And some of this is things that I set up a long time ago. Some of it is things I set up more recently. Some of it is things that I've done in the last 3 days. But it's not too late to start. So if you're like, oh, but Jen, you started some of this when you were 25 and you're 51. Yeah, I have time on my side that makes it easier for me to get back on the wagon, but it doesn't make it easy to do the things. Because I'm going to tell you right now, I had a hell of a hard time getting myself out of bed to exercise. Even today, I slept really well last night and for a good 8.5 hours, and I still had a hard time, but I was able to do it because I knew I'd feel better. So, number one is you want to set yourself up for success. And you've heard me talk about that before, but you want to think about the moment when you're supposed to do it. You're like when you have time. I don't even want to say supposed to, but when you intend to do the thing and set yourself up for success. So whether that's making something inaccessible, like I did with my phone and ability to watch Glee, or whether that's then putting something that you want to do, like your book or your daily win journal there. And for me, my alpha stem, because that helps with sleep. Whatever it is, you're setting yourself up for success. This morning, I had everything ready to exercise and meditate and do my morning writing because when I do that, I'm more likely to do it for the full time. Because I've been doing these for so long now, I usually at least do it, even if it's just for an abbreviated amount of time to keep up the habit, which is also important, but then I'm not really getting what I need from those practices, that ADHD care. So, number one, set yourself up for success. But I also want to say this. A lot of times, in response to what I'm saying, I hear people say, but it's hard. I can't do it. I just can't exercise. I can't meditate. And I get it. I get that there's a part of you that feels like you can't. And I get that it's hard with ADHD. Perhaps harder with ADHD than without ADHD. I guess I don't know. I don't have a non ADHD brain. But from the outside, when we look at other people, it sure looks like they're doing things more easily. So while it's hard, let me ask you, how hard is it to feel tired and drained all day? How hard is it to not be able to get yourself to start tasks or complete them, or to not to waste time all day just trying to get yourself to start, only to get really motivated at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and then not have time to finish, or not have time to do what you need to do in the evening, feed yourself, or I guess if you have kids, hopefully you're feeding them. But like, how does that feel for you? How does it feel when you are so distracted that you cannot direct and sustain your focus, so that things take way longer and then you have less time to do the fun things, to spend time with your loved ones, to do the things you want to do? How fun is it, or how hard is it, I should say, to deal with emotional spirals? I gotta believe it's hard, and probably harder than getting yourself to exercise, right? Like, it's probably harder. And if it doesn't feel hard, if it feels easier to do this hard stuff that ADHD creates, if that feels easier than doing the exercise and stuff, then you're probably okay. It's like, yeah, just keep living your life. But if you're like, no, this stuff is really hard, well, and I say this with love and compassion in my heart, maybe it's time to choose your hard, because at some point you can keep doing the hard stuff of ADHD, but it's not going to be any easier if you don't choose the hard thing of also doing ADHD care. And I'm not saying you have to do all those things. I would start with sleep. If you're not getting good, solid 8 hours of sleep a night, eight and a half, up to nine, maybe 9.5, I'd say at most for most people. More than that, you start to feel groggy. But if you're not getting good sleep, now granted, if you have a newborn, I get that's different, right? Like if you've got young kids, you're probably getting woken up in the middle of the night. That's not what I'm talking about. But if you're not getting good sleep, if you're not able to prioritize sleep, I would start there, because all the other stuff is not going to do you worth a hill of beans if you are not sleeping, because not sleeping basically it just exacerbates your ADHD. Lack of sleep looks like ADHD for people who don't have it. So it's like you've got to get your sleep in. So start there and stop thinking that you have to do a million things all at once. Start small, right? So you've heard me talk about that. I just wanted to name, though, sometimes we're like, oh, it's too hard to exercise. I really want to point out, well, isn't it hard having ADHD? Isn't it hard not being able to focus? Isn't it hard always teetering on the edge of burnout, being exhausted? Because I believe the answer is yes. And if you don't think it's hard, then maybe you just keep your life as it is. And if you notice something inside of you saying, no, then maybe you get to pick a different hard thing right now, which is doing some of the ADHD self care or self love practices, right? So maybe just notice what of those hard things of ADHD apply to you, because that might direct your focus towards the ADHD care thing that you would benefit from the most. And here's the thing, like, this is the absolute truth. You don't have to do a single one of these things. You really don't. And if you do, your ADHD will be less hard. So you have a choice. You always have a choice. And if you're like, I don't have a choice, I've got kids and no, I get it. I totally get it. And when you have kids, you do have additional things on your plate that someone like me doesn't have. I have two businesses instead of kids, right? Like when you're a mom, you've got you've got your job or your business, and then you've got your family. So I get it. I get that puts a lot on your plate, and it can be emotionally exhausting and draining. And it's like figuring out, how can we help you through this? How can we help you figure out what's reasonable? And maybe consider, what has you believing that you always have to put yourself last? What has you believing that you don't have time? Because chances are there are some parts of you that have adopted beliefs on who you're supposed to be, how you're supposed to be in the world, and in what ways you're supposed to spend your time and energy. And I'm not saying you should just abandon your children and not feed them dinner. Like, I'm not talking about that. But there may be some things, and I'm not trying to pick on moms, but I know that tends to be one of the big arguments. It's like, I just don't have time or energy to exercise or whatever. But these ADHD self-love practices, self-love ADHD care practices will actually give you time. And you will yell at your kids less if you're a mom. You'll be a better coach or therapist or author or artist, whatever it is, when you do your ADHD care. So you're actually going to get time back. So some of it, and this is the big piece I wanted to get to today, is going to be leaning in and getting curious about the parts of you that don't feel like you can do it. The part who can't exercise. What's that about? What's the concern if you were to exercise? What makes it hard? Get curious, understand the underlying piece there. Because chances are there's a way you can move your body if you want to. It's just figuring out what way is going to work for you. With ADHD, often it's important to make it interesting. It can be very hard to get yourself to do boring workouts. Right? I broke my arm a couple years ago. It was 2021, so 4 years ago now. Well, 3.5, whatever, it doesn't matter. I broke my arm doing Zumba of all things. I tripped into my boxes. I was staying with my aunt after moving back to Minnesota, and I broke my arm. And the doctor didn't want me doing Zumba because if I fell, I could really cause damage. My break was relatively minor. So the only exercise that I could do, I couldn't even like lift weights or anything. The only exercise I was allowed to do was walking. And walking bores the snot out of me. Like, it is so boring to me. I can do hiking. I like hiking because there's pretty things to look at and then there's things to climb over. And so that's a little more stimulating for me. But just walking around the area bores me. Plus, it was during COVID, so you couldn't even go anywhere all that cool. Oh yeah, it was 2020. So anyway, again, the time doesn't matter. ADHD moment. So anyway, I listened to podcasts. At that time, there were a ton of podcasts that I loved listening to at the time. My yoga teacher, Christina Sell, had her podcast. Brene Brown had hers. Was just really loving digging into all the podcasts that I was enjoying. And so that's what got me to do my walking. I would walk and listen to podcasts. And that helped me be able to walk for an hour and a half every single day, which is not something I normally wanted to do. But I was able to do it because I was excited to listen. So making it interesting is important, even if it's a workout you don't feel like doing. So this morning, I didn't feel like working out at all. I didn't even feel like doing Zumba, which is usually my go-to because usually it's fun, but I didn't really particularly enjoy the last class I did. Just there were a couple of songs I was like, oh. So anyway, I can always do another class, an older class, but I just was not feeling it today. So I did this workout. It's like Grow with Anna or Anna, maybe. I'm not sure. And they're tough killer workouts. I don't even know how I got myself to do it, but I was like, ooh, that sounds interesting. I'll get to see what her new workout is because it's a new one that I've added to my repertoire. So there was novelty there. And that helped me be able to do it. On days when I don't feel like weightlifting, I make sure that the music I'm listening to is interesting. Often I just put on 89.3 The Current, which is a indie rock alternative station in the Twin Cities where I live, which you can also get on the Current app, by the way. But anyway, I listen to that while I'm exercising because it's interesting to me while I'm doing my weightlifting, rather, because I've been weightlifting for so long, like 31 years, that to continue weightlifting without anything stimulating me is boring. It would be very hard to get myself to do, but because I'm doing something fun, I can do it. So you get the idea. If exercise is the thing you want to get yourself to do, you've got to find a way to make it interesting for yourself. Walk your dog, walk with a friend or a neighbor, walk with your neighbor and their dog. I used to crash walks with my neighbors and their dogs all the time because they walk by my house. Though they informed me that I wasn't actually crashing them because if they didn't want me along, they would have walked a different route. I was like, oh, that's good to know that you have that boundary there. So I don't have to worry that I'm being annoying. I love when people have good boundaries. Then you just know. So, anyway, whatever it is you're wanting to do to help your ADHD, try to make it interesting, but also lean in and get curious about what's hard for you about it. What makes you not want to do it? And sometimes I do brain dump writing every morning, which is really it's morning pages from Julie Cameron's book The Artist's Way. But I basically do stream of consciousness, just dumping my brain writing every morning. And one of the things I hear from people about that is they have a part of them who doesn't feel safe writing things down. And a lot of times there's some unresolved wounds around someone having read their journal and using it against them in some way. So it's like maybe there's something like that needs to be resolved for you to be able to do the thing. Sometimes with meditation, people will say, I can, well, not sometimes, almost all the time with meditation, people are stressed about being with their thoughts. Oh my gosh, I can't handle all those thoughts. Well, number one, your thoughts are always there. It's just sometimes you're paying attention to them and sometimes you're not. But it's not about quieting your thoughts. So it's understanding what meditation really is. If a seated practice doesn't work for you because you're overwhelmed by thoughts, then acknowledge that part of you and say, okay, well, let's do mindful toothbrushing instead. Let's be mindful while we're gardening or doing the dishes. So you can work with the parts of you that have the concern and then shift the ADHD care, your self-love ritual, to do something that is less concerning. That's an easier entry point for you. Set yourself up for success. So I also want to say this. Sometimes the language we use, probably not even sometimes, most of the time, the language we use around things more deeply ingrains the challenge. So if you've been telling yourself for years, I don't exercise or I can't exercise, which I'm just going to say cancel that because I don't want to take that on. But if you've been saying that, or if you're like, nope, can't meditate, right? If you're saying that, then parts of you, like that's what you're telling yourself you're capable of over and over. And so maybe try on some language shifts. I haven't figured out how to get myself to exercise yet. I haven't found exercise that's enjoyable for me yet. I haven't figured out how to meditate in a way that works for me yet. Try on those things. Yeah, it takes longer to say, but notice what happens in your body when you say the words I can't. It's just a complete wall. It's just shut down and nope. And sure, you may have a part of you that's relieved because now you don't have to figure out how to get yourself to do it. That's some of the secondary gain that we talked about earlier. But also, there you might have parts of you that are like, but we want to, and you have this like inner polarization to work through. So I really recommend leaning in and getting curious about what's really going on and not just being okay with I can't, I don't know how, it doesn't work for me, because chances are there's a way it can work for you. And I only suggest this because a lot of times, especially if you're like in my shoes, where I was assessed when I was 29 for ADHD and thought I was told I didn't have it. I didn't get the diagnosis because I was told I didn't meet criteria because I was functioning too well. Never mind the fact that I was spending hours upon hours every day just trying to cope with ADHD. But I didn't have enough self-awareness at the time to recognize that, to have the conversation. So it wasn't until more recently that I've even noticed the impact of this ADHD. But so for me, it wasn't until I was in my like mid to upper 40s where I even would have considered ADHD meds. And by now I'm like, well, I mean, I'm doing well enough. I'm not that stressed about it anymore because I've got all these tools and strategies that I use really consistently. So for me, I'm okay with not taking medication. And that is pretty common for late diagnosed or yet to be diagnosed, possibly won't be diagnosed, but probably have ADHDers, right? A lot of us ladies are like, why do I need that at this point in my life? I'm not going to take meds. It's not like I'm going to go on Adderall at age 50. You might go on Adderall at age 50. That might work for you. That's not something I'm choosing for myself at this time in my life. I might choose it when I'm 60. Who knows? But If you're choosing to not go the medication route, then I would recommend you choose something that will still help your ADHD rather than continuing to suffer the way you have been. And that's why I talk about this as so important. But I want to be clear as we're wrapping up here. Number one, there's no shame in this being hard. It's hard partly because of your ADHD. It's probably also hard because of the secondary challenges of ADHD with everyone criticizing you and shaming you over the course of your life for not being able to follow through or get yourself to do stuff or whatever is there, right? You've heard me talk about that. But also, I mean, it's just hard sometimes. And if you want things to be different, you're going to have to do something differently. And so just know I say that with love in my heart because I want you to have the life you want. I don't want you to struggle with the pain of it anymore. It just means that you might be uncomfortable along the way. And it's up to you whether the discomfort of changing is worse than the pain of staying the same. Thanks for being here. If you found this helpful, I'd love it if you're on YouTube, like it or comment in some way, even on the podcast app that you're listening to, you can comment or share this episode. I would love that because as you do that, more people get to see what I'm offering and then they get this help too. So I would really appreciate that, not just for you, but for everyone else. And thank you so much for being here. Take care.